Welcome everybody to this new edition of SEO Day in English. Welcome everybody who's participating for the very first time to this event dedicated 100% to SEO. And of course, welcome back to everybody who's been with us in all the past editions. My name is Santiago Torreirosa, and today I have the pleasure to be hosting this event with Claudio. Welcome, Claudio.
Thank you so much. It was a long flight from New York to Argentina. It's hot weather over there. It's cold weather over here, so I'm a little cold, but happy to be here, happy to be part of this event and be with everyone in the SEO community globally. So good morning to everyone, and welcome to the first edition of SEO Day in English. It's a pleasure for me to be presenting one of the biggest online and international SEO events. And my name is Claudio Cabrera, and I'm the VP of News Strategy and Audience at The Athletic. And today with Santi, we will be presenting this event. So shall we begin?
Let's get going. Sounds good. So to kick off the event, we have our very first speaker of the day. We will be speaking with Barry Schwartz. He is president and web developer at Rusty Brick and is also the news editor at Search Engine Land. He's also had an advisory role with Google, Yahoo, Microsoft Bing, and several other internet companies. And in 2018, he was awarded the US Search Personality of the Year. Welcome, Barry. Can you hear us?
I hear you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you, Barry. I've been following you for years in the SEO industry. I grew up on you, so I'm happy to say that I've learned so much from you. So I really wanted to ask you, how do you feel participating in SEO Day in English, our first edition?
Oh, it's an honor to be here. Thanks so much for having me. So it seems like a very massive event, and I'm glad I could help out in any way possible.
It's great. It's great to have you here, Barry. So let's get started. Let's kick this off. Sounds good?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a couple questions for you, and the idea is just kind of a chat about it. And the first question we have was, so I think this is one of the most, I think there's a top 5 of SEO questions that are usually asked on and on again, but I think one of the most popular ones are, what do we do in the case of a core update? How do we act? Do we go for the fire extinguishers? Do we go to the bunkers? What do we do? Let us know.
So you give up, you don't do anything, you just run away and hide in a corner. I'm joking. I mean, it's interesting what people say and people do. So the main thing, people get panicked, and panicking is totally normal. You see your traffic could potentially drop from 20, 60, 100%, all your traffic overnight just goes away. But the main thing is to just wait and see how that rollout happens. Usually these core updates take about 2 weeks, 1 to 2 weeks, sometimes a little longer to fully roll out. Sometimes Google does these tweaks and reversals of those updates. So wait until Google says the update is done, give it a couple more days, and then see how much you were impacted and if you were impacted. You probably will know if you were impacted by a core update by just seeing a pretty significant traffic drop, usually a day or two after Google announces there's a core update that happened. So if you know you were hit by a core update, then it's time to go to the Google advice stuff, which basically is high level, make sure your website's the best out there in terms of the content and so forth. And that's kind of not that, specific, but it's interesting. Back in, I think it was 2019, everybody's asking Google, give us some advice around how we could go ahead and fix our websites after a Google core update. And Google's there is no fix. There is nothing wrong with your website. It's just how our quality algorithm works. So we're just finding that maybe your website, even though it's fine and it works perfectly fine and it's good, there's just something better that we want to rank above it. So then Google said, all right, we'll give you some things you could think about around making your site better. Mm-hmm. And the first thing they referenced was go back to the Google Panda advice from 2011, where they talked about how to build higher quality websites. Mm-hmm. And then they went ahead and gave some specific questions around content quality, expertise questions, how you present your content online, and then maybe how you do comparative information around your content. And there's a big list of questions. I don't know if you want me to go through all of them, but it's basically ultimately about making your site better than it is today, asking your users what they think is better, and basically providing something that's better than you have today. And that's hard to do. If you own your website, you think you have the best website out there. And sometimes it makes sense to poll your users, see what they want from you, and get more information from them, and maybe get a third party to actually review your website to say, it's not usually a technical issue with your website. It's not like a meta tag. It's not like some code you have to add to your website. It's generally related to the content on your website, either pruning some of that off where it's not high quality anymore and no longer relevant, or maybe building up some of the content that you have on the website to make it better, or maybe posting new content that is more relevant to today. So there's a bunch of things you could do, and I don't know if you want to go through it in detail, but let me know.
Okay, no, that's a great response. And aside from maybe the traditional, Google Analytics, Adobe, maybe the traditional measurement tools, do you look at any other particular tool when these kind of updates hit? I know we get real-time data with, analytics and maybe some other tools. We know Search Console, we might have a little bit of a delay. Is there any other go-to tool that you have for these kind of situations?
Yeah, I mean, so Google Search Console is probably the go-to one. It tells you directly how your traffic visibility has been impacted by any update. Obviously, it's a slightly delayed. It's not so real-time. If you want to see real-time stuff, you could always hone into Google Analytics and filter by the source of Google organic search, and then see even hourly or real-time. Some like really large sites can see in real-time if their traffic has dropped. And then there's other tools like SEMrush, and I'm sure there's a lot of sponsors here as well that actually track visibility changes and also changes in Google search results and tell you how much your site has been impacted by that. But don't always blindly look at those third-party tools. You should compare those tools to real data that you have about your own website, either through Google Analytics or maybe another analytics provider that you have access to, or Google Search Console.
Perfect.
So when we talk about different languages, Barry, do you think non-English speaking regions should work and anticipate in the same way in front of a Google product reviews update, knowing there still isn't one rolled out globally?
For sure. That is definitely the case. So like the product reviews update hasn't rolled out globally yet, but there's no reason not to prepare for it. Google generally, when they update their algorithms, they generally push them out globally and across all languages, but there are some algorithms that launch on day one, specifically only in specific regions, generally English first. Like Panda was English first and it rolled out globally to all languages. The core update is global for all languages. And the product reviews update is currently not global for all languages. It's only English global. So it only looks at English language, but that's going to change. Google said it's going to change. And there's no reason to not work on those types of things before the Google update rolls out for non-English language pages. So yeah, it's a great way for you to prepare and say, these are the things I need to do today to get ready for an upcoming update that's going to hit, my language in my region.
And Barry, would you, are there any communities that you would point people towards to kind of get the information in regards to a Google update, maybe in English first and then traveling to other countries or other languages?
Yeah, I mean, so Google generally posts on their Google Search Central blog when these updates happen, so you'll be aware that these are happening. Obviously, I cover it. You can follow me probably best on Twitter at Rusty Brick. But there's definitely a lot of communities. Google has their own community in the Google Search Central webmaster forums. There are webmaster forums at Webmaster World. There's a lot of great online forums out there. Twitter is amazing. I love the Twitter SEO community. There's a lot of very helpful people out there. There's tons and tons of articles from the community as well. Some of the speakers you have on here today probably will be talking about it, but just to name a few, Glenn Gabe always drills down deeply into these core updates. Lily Ray, Morty, a lot of people do this. I don't want to name everybody, but there's tons and tons of great articles about what you need to do when a core update hits you and how to prepare for it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the cool things about the SEO industry over the past 5, 10, maybe 15 years is the amount and the diversity of those kind of communities has really grown. And as we all know, there's rarely a one-shot answer that kind of fixes everything and applies to everyone the same way. So kind of being able to have different points of view and different perspectives from different types of websites, different types of businesses, I think that's really helpful to figure out where should I get started in that sense. And in relation to the previous question we had about the Google product reviews update, is there anything in particular you recommend we take a look at if we're talking about marketplaces, e-commerce websites, service-based websites? Is there anything in particular you recommend?
Right. So the product reviews update is not necessarily. That's a little better. Do you hear the echo?
Thank you.
Oh, it's much better.
Yeah,
I'm sorry about that. Anyway, so the product reviews update is not specific to e-commerce sites per se. They're really about product reviews in general. So specifically, if you see somebody do a review of, I don't know, the latest Rode mics or the latest iPad, Google really, it's not really about like, does that product result page actually have some type of review on it or reviews? It's not about the reviews on the page. It's about the product reviews by review bloggers, review YouTubers, and so forth on that. So it's very interesting to see, there's a lot of confusion about the product reviews saying it's e-commerce related. Yeah, it's somewhat e-commerce related, but you have people like, very famous YouTubers that are reviewing these things. And some of them just do a quick review with embedding like product images from the actual manufacturer and just using their description. But the ones that do a really good job are the ones that actually test it out, try it, compare it to other products, go through all the specs, and then say, do these specs align with the actual product? This is something that you should buy. And they really go through from a user's perspective how that product works. Are they knowledgeable about that product? That's another question you should ask. Like even myself, like I do a lot of Google stuff, and I'm always testing stuff in Google search to make sure I know how it works before I actually write the article. I started a new blog on some EV vehicles, and I'm actually buying the EV vehicles so I can actually get hands-on experience with it. Otherwise, I'm just reading what other people are saying and then regurgitating that, which is fine. But you have to actually have a hands-on approach when you're writing your product reviews. Otherwise, Google's not going to probably rank it so well.
Yeah, and I think before we head to the next question, I think that's kind of related, or directly or indirectly, to EAT, because in that sense, you kind of have to have certain authority to be able to review a product, and to have kind of that authority. In some cases, you're an expert, and you specialize in reviewing cars, or you specialize in reviewing tech, or many different things. But at the same time, if you don't have that hands-on experience, how much authority do you really have to say, hey, this is, the specs are good, this is a good fit, if this is what you're looking to resolve with this particular product or service. So I think it's really interesting how that all kind of ties in together.
Absolutely. And Barry, myself working for a news publisher, I know that Google's constantly changing. You see knowledge panels, feature snippets, and so much more. How do you really think that Google search can evolve in the next few years? And do you think we can stop seeing traditional results in certain searches and replace them with featured snippets at some point?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think we've seen Google change drastically since, I think it was like 2009, 2010. I forgot the exact date when Google launched what's called universal search. And it used to be just 10 blue links of search results, and that went away with universal search. We got local, we got videos, we got all these other types of elements directly in the search results. Feature snippets launched a couple years after that, and SEOs were like, oh no, Google's just scraping my content, and people are going to read it and not click on it. I think most SEOs are like, yeah, I want the featured snippet. I want to rank #1 for that featured snippet, which is cool. So I think you'll see Google constantly continue to adapt, test more and more. I mean, I covered Google Test literally like several times a week. Google's constantly testing user interface changes, new features. Google's very big into this concept of MUM, where they didn't release a lot of features yet around MUM, but there's a lot of stuff that's going to come out in the next year or two that makes the search results even more dynamic and more, scary for SEOs. But use that change as an opportunity. SEOs should be using that change as an opportunity to say, what could I do to leverage these changes in Google search and monetize my websites, or leverage my websites to actually rank well in those features?
And I agree. And I think in many cases, the overarching kind of advice is still the same. You need to generate quality content. Anything else that you may do is great. It could be helpful from more of a technical side. But if you're not generating something that's original, that's quality, maybe how Google interprets that content and how Google interprets that information may change depending on what kind of result it wants to show. But at the end of the day, the only true way to be able to capitalize on those things is generating great content. So yeah, thank you very much, Barry, for being here, for kicking off this event.
Thank you, Barry.
We hope to speak soon.
Thanks so much for having me, and have a wonderful day today.
Bye, take care, Barry. So we'll go for a brief pause, and we'll be right back.
So to continue with the event, we actually have the pleasure to present our second speaker of the day, Morty Oberstein. Morty has been the head of SEO branding at Wix for the last 2 years. Also, since 2021, he is a communication advisor at SEMrush, and he also contributes SEO content in publications on SEMrush, Search Engine Land, and Moz, to name a few.
So today, Morty will be telling us how optimizing for Google Mum will look like. Welcome, Morty. Are you there? Can you hear us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes, we can.
perfect. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
No, appreciate you having here as well. How do you
Welcome.
feel participating in this first SEO day in English?
I'm super excited. I love presenting. I'm an old teacher, so I feel like I'm back in school again. even though where I am today, there's a teacher strike, and my kids are currently
Oh, really?
at home. Yeah,
Okay.
but I feel like I'm back in class, in front of the classroom, teaching again. So I always like presenting, always like geeking out on some SEO stuff, some cool stuff for you. So,
Okay, great. Well, the virtual stage is all yours, Morty.
oh boy, here we go.
Enjoy.
Share my screen really quick. Sorry for all you at home while I do this. Okay.
Perfect.
Awesome. So today we're talking about Mum, what optimizing, whoops, this went backwards by accident, pardon me. What optimizing for Mum is going to look like. I hate the word optimizing. You'll see why, and we'll talk about that. But for the sake of titles, we're talking about optimizing for Google Mum, which is not yet fully integrated into the algorithm, but it will be. There we go. My name is Morty Oberstein. I am the head of SEO branding at Wix. I'm a communications advisor at SEMrush. I'm the host of the SEO Rant podcast and a co-host of the Edge of the Web News podcast, blah, blah, blah. That's who I am. Anyway, let's get right to it. So what is Mum? Mum is multitask unified model. So I'm glad I could solve that for you, right? There you go. Essentially, what makes Mum really, really, really unique is that one is really, really powerful, which we'll get to that also, but also it takes multiple forms of input and it puts out multiple outputs. So machine learning in general takes in one input, it puts out one output. What you might have seen with Mum at various Google I/O sessions is that it does a lot with image and text. So for example, you can take a picture with Google Lens. So you take a picture of a shirt with a flamingo on it, and you say, hey, I want socks with the same thing, same pattern. And Google will say, great. We'd match the image, we matched your text input, and we give you an output of socks with a flamingo on it. So it's matching multiple forms of media for an output, which makes Mum really, really unique, which we're not going to really focus on that part today, and you'll see why. Great, so let's get into some really, really actionable tips about Mum, except not. See, we're dealing with a machine learning property, and with the machine learning property, actionable tips require context. So if you're just here for the actionable tips, this is a part of the lesson where you close your ears. But anyway, like I mentioned, when it comes to content when it comes to machine learning properties and creating content for machine learning properties, context is really, really, really important because you have to understand fundamentally what's happening, why it's happening. You don't have to go super deep into it, but just a really broad understanding of that is super important. I'm going to show you why. So let's start off with why Google needs Mum. Why did Google decide, yeah, we're going to integrate this into the algorithm. We're going to start integrating into the algorithm, which they already have. And it's only going to continue going forward. Well, to quote Barry, the blue links, the 10 blue links, and the SERP is fundamentally built on the 10 blue links, even though we have tons and tons of SERP features, is old and not new, and it presents a whole series of problems. What exactly are the problems with the 10 blue links? Well, fundamentally, TLDR, the 10 blue links don't allow for exploration. They don't allow you to say, hey, here's a great look at all the topics or subtopics related to your query. Now you can decide where you want to go, which subtopics or topics you want to dive into. So they lack exploration because they're not fundamentally categorized. Although with the knowledge panel SERPs, you do kind of see some kind of categorization, but across the board, they're not really categorized. You don't really know, here's a topic, here's a subtopic, here's another subtopic, which means that you can't really control your user journey the way that you really like to. Which, by the way, goes into content expectations. Well, let me just make a general point about content. Content is one of the most changing, malleable things on the entire planet. And how content changes, how users expect content to be consumed, and their expectations around content in general, how those change over time can have an enormous impact, an impact that I can't even put like words to. I'll try to give you an example, the greatest example of what I mean here. So back in 1960, there was the first presidential debate on TV ever. Now, if you were listening to the debate between Richard Nixon and JFK on the radio, polls show that Richard Nixon won. But if you were watching on TV, you thought that JFK won. Why? Well, because Richard Nixon looks like Richard Nixon and JFK looks like JFK. But the point is that forever changed the way that presidential candidates create content, as in present themselves, and what we expect out of those presidential candidates. So the way content changes, the way the technology around content changes, and the way the expectations around content evolve have an enormous impact. In the SEO context, applying that to SEO, you see this with zero-click searches, right? Zero-click searches. There's also to answer boxes. No one's clicking to your website. Everybody freaks out. I think we as SEOs get that wrong. What I think is happening is that the content expectations have changed. For example, when I type in Yankee scores, I do not ever want to go to a website. I would rather just get the information right in the SERP. And I will tell you the truth that if I don't get it from Google, Major League Baseball, whatever sports league, is going to send me a notification right from the app that I have on my phone anyway. So if Google doesn't do it, someone else is going to do the zero click. Why? Because content expectations have changed. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, what was really unique about the web was I can find anything. That's not really unique anymore. What's unique now is, wow, it's super easy to access that information, which hence Google is ahead of the curve or has been ahead of the curve around this and have all sorts of information on the SERP, not to steal your clicks, but to align with how users want to consume content. So the question we have to ask now is, what stage of the web are we in now? And in short, the web is a teenager, meaning the web is really, really skeptical. And I know when we as SEOs or digital marketers, we see Google, we see Facebook, they go in front of Congress and we're laughing, right? Someone from Congress asked a really stupid question to Google. We're like, oh, what a dumb question. But the average person looks at that and says, wow, why is Facebook in front of Congress? Maybe I shouldn't be trusting Facebook or Google. Or to zoom out, maybe I shouldn't be